Hello, everyone. Welcome for Jewish Wisdom for Coping with the Pandemic. I'm here with Finn, the spiritual kitty, along with many of our regulars. We meet every Thursday at 4 o'clock Pacific time to explore one Mussar soul trait to help us cope with the pandemic and whatever else may be coming up for us in our lives. Today, we are going to be focusing on the soul trait of honor. And as we always do, we're going to begin with a short meditation to help us create some sacred space, to help us create a little boundary and distance from the outside world so we can share the next hour together in community. I'm going to turn off my cell phone too. All right, so everyone, and that's you too, Finn. I want you to close your eyes and relax in your seat. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. As you go at your own pace of inhaling and exhaling, if thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go. Like watching a car move past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. The next time you inhale, think to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema. Listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema. Listen. And when you are ready, you may open your eyes. So we see we have a number of people I haven't greeted yet. We have Harry and Marianne and Joanne, Wendy and Haya, Karen and Stephanie and Irene, and also Marjorie. So Marjorie, hello, welcome. To begin our exploration here, we're going to look at this quote from Kavod, which says, "Who is wise? One who learns from every person." So my question today is, what is kind of one of the most surprising people you've ever learned from? What's a surprising learning experience that you had? Yeah, Marianne.
Well, I've really learned from one of my sons because I grew up thinking that having certain ideas that everybody goes to college and everybody does certain things. And my son told me he'd rather kill himself than go to college. So that opened my eyes to that. And he wanted tattoos, which I was always, and he also wanted to wear these, I don't know what we call them out here is wife beater shirts. I hate that term, but maybe you know what that means. And he's totally different. And he has taught me so much and really helped me grow.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marianne, for sharing that. Yes, Wendy.
One of the people that I've learned from, I started babysitting him about I don't know. They're not going to have him tested, and that's okay. But what he taught me, because he didn't talk, but we still communicated. He taught me how we could communicate, and I could help him to communicate to others, and that he didn't like to be touched. So I learned a new way of showing love without like in touching a baby, because usually you would hold the child. It's fascinating, and we're still friends, and he's fantastic, and we're going to be writing letters. I just moved, and it's 5 o'clock here. But Paul, his name is Paul, and yeah, he's just taught me so much about a different way to love.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience with little Paul, the teacher. Bonnie.
So a number of years ago, a Black Jew by choice, whose great-grandfather was Jewish, Black guy from New Hampshire, and I'm absolutely blanking on his name, put out a wonderful book called, I believe, Love Song. And he came to Santa Clara County, and he was the chazan at our shul one Shabbat morning. And he raised the joy level of services that I've never experienced. And I'm a regular synagogue member, and I travel. I went to a university that had a rabbinical school, so I was very involved. But this gentleman, and I'm sure some of you know what his name is, and I'm just blanking on it, just introduced me to a level of a service that I've never experienced since then. It was wonderful.
Thank you for sharing that. Sounds wonderful. Anyone else like to share? Okay, well, that is fine. We will dig a little bit deeper. And again, my goal for today is to try to get all of you into the breakout groups by 4:30, so that we'll have 4:30 Pacific. So there'll be time to, more time to spend with one another. Okay, so let's revisit our assumptions a little bit. And this is a really important one when it comes to honor, is the idea that we all have everyone has a divine spark, but it is occluded by our baggage. And it's been a little while since we have talked about this one. So I'm going to stop the share and just kind of open it up. What strikes you about that? What questions does it raise? Does it make sense? Does it not work for you? Go open-ended on this one.
Can you put it in the chat?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, Wendy.
I love that, actually. And I'm in total agreement with that. And I'm thinking sometimes you're with someone and you're talking to them, sharing something, and there's the divine spark. And then all of a sudden the baggage rolls in and you're like, oh, there's a baggage. And then you see somebody and you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't talk to this person. Maybe they've got a little problem or something. I don't want to. And then all of a sudden you see the divine spark. So it's really lovely the way that it's interwoven into the person, and you never know when it's going to kind of pop up. And I love that because it's there. The divine spark is there.
Wendy. Also say, I call these assumptions because you might agree with it, you might not, but if you sort of assume that that's true, it can sort of open up possibilities and open up doors for our practice and for how we relate to ourselves or to other people. What do I mean by baggage? I can't tell if that's your hand or if you're just percolating.
I just want to say somebody's typing and I can hear it. So if everybody could mute who's not actually speaking, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, hi.
Well, baggage to me is not necessarily stuff we're born with, but that came in through us in terms of, I mean, you can have, historical trauma, which you didn't even experience yourself per se, but your family, the history of your people that you're carrying. I think sometimes just carrying baggage of, people said something to you and you believed it, and it may not be, it may be true or not be true, but it's something that hurts you is, I think sometimes often is the baggage. I don't think baggage necessarily is all these good things that happened, because those things I think only open you up more. So I think you're more occluded with those negative thoughts about yourself.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think sometimes I'll think it's the stuff you carry around, the bad breakup, the death of someone, the disappointment about this or that. And it can get in the way. It can get in the way of being our best self. It can get in the way of seeing someone else's best self. So given that, let's start to look at honor. A volunteer to read this first bullet, please.
I'll read. Bonnie.
Okay.
Honor is the ability to recognize the humanity in other people, feel empathy, and treat them with respect, dignity, and even with reverence. Do you want me to read the second piece?
Yeah, I want to read the second one too.
Both humility and honor concern how we relate to other people. Humility focuses on knowing our proper place in the world. Honor focuses on the converse, giving others their due.
Great, thank you. I'm going to copy both of these and we'll stop the share. Okay. So what is honor? And the Hebrew word for this is kavod, which comes up quite a bit in a number of different prayers and teachings and in a lot of circumstances. So it shows up in a lot of places within Jewish teaching and wisdom and practice. So what is honor all about? What is this kavod stuff? Yes, Joanne.
Just check. Yeah, I think that Kavod has to do with recognizing in other people their humanity and their positive attributes and treating other people respectfully. That's what is to me. I mean, I know a lot of the Kavod in Judaism is towards God, but also, I guess in Pirkei Avos is a lot about being humble and learning from everybody, because everyone has something to teach us.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Joanne. Yeah, it's, as you say, there's that connection with humility. Marjorie, did I see your hand as well, or were you just moving around? No, okay.
Me? Sorry. I'm just holding my phone in my hand.
It reminds me of a famous quote that I'm no I'm no better than anybody else and nobody else is any better than I am.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really, it's about like being better. And then we'll get to Bonnie after this. But at one point when I was a teenager, I was talking to my father and talking about people who maybe weren't as smart as me or as educated, or maybe were, you know, never went to college. And so he said to me, he's like, well, do you think you're better than those people? And I was like, yeah, I kind of do. And he's like, well, you're not. You know, you may be better educated, you may have had more opportunities or whatever, but just because you have more money or maybe you have better manners or you're smarter, whatever, you're still no better than anybody else. And that really, you know, I probably was surly because I was a teenager, but it certainly stayed with me. And it really, I think, became very, very foundational. So next up is Bonnie. Bonnie, please remember to unmute.
I was very blessed. I really have had wonderful parents. But I do remember saying to myself, and maybe to friends, not to my siblings, I'm never going to do what mother or dad did. I was going to, you know, live life very differently. And I find as an older adult that there's so many things that I look back on that I know I do because my parents did. And things that I'm very glad that I do because my parents did, in spite of being an obnoxious teenager and young adult. And I wish my parents were still alive so that I could have told them that. So I'm not sure I ever gave them the kavod that they deserved.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. And of course, that reminds many of us that, you know, one of the 10 commandments is to honor our parents, which is using the same word. And it's hard. It's, you know, there's a lot that could be said about that, and a lot of challenges depending on who we are and who our parents are. I don't know if it's Paul or Carrie.
Yeah, I was thinking about how there are times when I have, well, I think of honoring somebody is in many ways like seeing them and letting them know that they're seen. And there are a couple of times in my life where somebody has just told me something about myself, which meant that they had really seen something nice, you know, something good in me. And it was so powerful when that happened. And I like to think that I am paying that forward by doing the same with others, that when I see an opportunity to let somebody know that I see this part of them that maybe they don't really acknowledge themselves, that's an important thing I can do in the world.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it's a real gift that we can give to people and that we can pass on. Thank you. Chaya, and then Wendy, and then Karen.
I guess I come from a place also from my Buddhist background of we all come into this world, but whatever causes and conditions that we live in or live with or have met us with is, you know, maybe what changes us, but that isn't due to those causes and conditions. I still can honor you because you are you. You didn't choose this, maybe you didn't choose that. It's not about choice even. It's about, you know, I just think about people that have had real difficult times in their lives, or, you know, I'm just thinking even about, you know, what goes on, you know, between neighbors or between others. And I think sometimes it just hurts because it isn't the way they grew up or whatever, but they're still good people. You know, I think that everybody comes from a place of goodness because where else do we come from but that which is good, the best, the God, it's like, so I'm honoring God by honoring other people.
Beautifully said, Maya. And I think what you're saying is going to relate to what we're going to talk about in the breakout room as well. So thank you for sharing that. Wendy.
I think of
Wendy and Karen
honor.
and then Harry.
I think of honor as action. And I liked what Paul said about it being a process of paying it forward type of thing, and getting to know a person. But I'm thinking of all these college students, because I went to college as an older person, so I got to watch a lot of the students, and I could see honor for like their coaches and their teachers and their parents and what they did on the campus when those people weren't even in the picture. They weren't there, but I would watch students honor their parents. I didn't even know their parents, just by their own actions. They might be working on something and draw people in and make them feel better about themselves. They might take up for somebody, and there's in sports, there's all kinds of activity that goes on that shows honor, the sportsmanship and things like that. So I think that there's levels of honor. It just, if you don't know somebody, and if you really know them well, and they've informed your life, you might be more apt to understand that what you're doing is reflecting on them because they've given you something. And then, it's like the fifth commandment happens to be my favorite one. But anyway, just think action when I think of honor.
I'm so glad you brought up action, because that is where the rubber hits the road with Mussar. It's how do we implement these things? How can we do these things? And what holds us back from doing these things? Like, it's really easy in here. So yeah, I'm going to honor everybody, and even though they're different, and then you're, in the kiddish line or in the supermarket line, and someone in front of you is being really obnoxious or is holding forth on some issue that you disagree with, and that's where it gets hard. So thank you, Wendy. Karen and then Harry.
So I think about components of honor as respect and dignity, and the difference, which I delved into at some point, where dignity is inherently a part of us, which I think relates to the divine spark that has been mentioned previously, but that respect is something that needs to be earned, or it can be earned. And a couple of days ago, I brought my car in for inspection. And when it was done, I went to pick it up. And the gentleman I was paying said something. And I said, "Thank you, sir." I used the word sir. And he said to me, "Wow." And he was probably about 30 years old. He said, "Nobody's ever called me sir." And I thought about it. I use it often. My kids were raised that way. It was a sign of respect, but not because he'd earned my respect. It was, I guess, my natural way of just honoring the fact that there he was, and human, and he hadn't earned my respect, but I feel like when I honor someone, for me, it's the way I relate to them. So in that case, I can say, I tend to be conscientious of having respectful behavior, not because you've earned it, but because you have a divine spark and you've done nothing to make me feel that I should behave differently. As action. And that brings me to a question I asked someone a long time ago, which is, when you have difficult parents, how do you honor them? And this is, I guess, taught and written and maybe shared, that we honor them because they gave us life the way God gave the world to us, the way God created life. That's something that is supposed to be really beautiful. And if they do nothing else good for you, and you still want to honor your parents, you honor them for giving you life. And so I think of honor as a way of, my way of treating other people with honor is to treat them with respect, not because they deserve it, but because I feel that's my way of recognizing a divine spark.
Thank you, Karen. That's a beautiful way to articulate. One beautiful way to practice honor is just treating people respect, just as my younger daughter would say, just because, you know, just because they are human, just because they have a divine spark. Okay, we will hear from Harry and then we'll start getting ready for breakout groups.
I'll make it short and sweet because that's exactly what I was going to say, the Karen said. But I think of honor as respect. And it's an easier way to, I think in terms of respect more than I think of honor. It's respect is more natural for me than think of respect, but it's also a value and valuing human beings and valuing them and giving them that type of value is honoring them. So respect, I think, is, for me, is the operative word for honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry.
I just ask a quick question. When
Sure.
I just wanted to mention to Harry, I am interested in what you're saying, respect and honor. But I may not respect somebody's action, but I still honor them as a person. How do you, I mean,
Well,
I
and you could,
respect somebody that shot somebody, for example.
that's, you know, that's another way to, yeah, like I can sort of see where you're coming from. Yeah, I don't, I guess respect is a lower form of honor, but theoretically, you still respect the person and understand where he's coming from. I mean, he's still the person. He's still, you know, even though he made a bad choice, you still respect him as an individual that made a bad choice. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking is you still might refer to them as Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. You wouldn't call them Murderer Jim, you know, it's some ways of dignity. Janet, I see your hand is up as well.
Yes, I'm reminded of a couple of things. One is years ago, I interviewed Sister Helen Prejean, who was the author of the book Dead Man Walking, for which the movie, after which the movie was made, and she said we don't need to define a person solely by the worst thing they ever did. And in Cold Blood, and that is in the same vein, Truman Capote talks about Perry, and he sees other qualities in him as artist. You know, there are many. Yes, he did a horrible thing, but there was more to him than that.
That's a great segue, I think, onto what we're going to talk about in our breakout groups, which is, you know, this issue of judgment. So let me share. Let's see. So we have a volunteer to read this quote, this top quote here.
I can read.
Okay.
Honor, Kavod, is a palpable sense of presence. It is receiving everyone, including ourselves, with Ein Tov, alive with divine ultimate goodness. We are getting out of the way of the relentless critic and judge.
Thank you. And Ein Tovah it means a good eye. So it's trying to see everyone with a good eye, getting out of the way of the relentless critic and judge. So in your breakout groups, maybe talk about what are some of the situations when sort of the relentless and critic and judge shows up in your head. And maybe what are some of the ways that you could get out of the way. So I'm going to put this in the chat.
Can you repeat that? There are people, I couldn't hear you.
Sure. So I entered it in the chat, but the idea is, you know, Rabbi Sheila Peltz Weinberg is talking about this idea of seeing people with a good eye. and getting out of the way of the relentless critic and judge, our internal critic, that internal critical voice. So when does the critic show up for you? When do you get really judgmental? And what are some of the ways that you could kind of get out of the way when you start getting that judgmental streak going? So again, these are private rooms. There's no judgment, it's confidential, there's no right or wrong answers. So we'll be in for like 8-10 minutes maybe.
Okay.
So please click on the hey everyone, welcome back.
That was so short. How long was that?
Yeah,
That
I feel
was-
it seems short too.
That was like 10 minutes.
It went quickly.
It did go quickly.
Well, I didn't use a timer, but I think it was a
That
good,
was a good 10 minutes,
it was a good 10 minutes.
It was.
It was.
Can I ask
It's
a
getting
question?
longer than
Oh,
what it used to be, Greg.
What's that?
It is
It's
longer.
getting longer than it used to be.
Yeah, well, that was the point. That's
That was great.
that's what we're trying to work on.
Can I ask a question? May I ask a question? Is that a yes?
Yeah, sorry, my computer decided.
Oh, I'm not hearing you.
Has been like attaching to my AirPods, even though they're sitting in their case. I'm just going to put them on so we don't get further distractions. So you had a question, Marianne, I believe.
Yes. How long is this for, this group? Like, how many weeks does it go?
For a lifetime.
Ever.
I hope
Well,
for
it is.
as long as Greg can put up with us.
We've been meeting almost 2 years with a couple of breaks in between. People have sort of come and go. It's a drop-in group. Usually we do a cycle of 13 soul traits. So that's with 2 weeks on each. So right now we're about halfway through the third cycle.
Oh, okay. I'm very grateful for this group, and it means so much to me. I'm definitely going to buy your book, and
Wonderful.
maybe make a donation to your institute or something.
Well, thank you. We can say, maybe we'll save any other housekeeping questions for the end, because
Okay, sorry.
really, no problem. Interested, excitement, it's always good. So I'm curious, what were some insights you had, or when might the judging voice show up for you, and how might you avoid it? Wendy?
My breakout room and I, partner and I, we had a great conversation. And I was positing that, choosing one point of honor for the person that you're kind of just about to judge and criticize. But then he just came up with this beautiful thing I loved. He was reading a book on consciousness and communication, an actual technique, which it's great. And he just said the word probe, ask questions. And I said, that's exactly what I do. That's exactly what it works. Socrates would say, not kidding. But anyway, I just loved it and walked away feeling empowered.
Great. Wonderful. Anyone else like to share about their experience? Yes, Bonnie.
So we had a really good conversation, I think. Turns out she lives where I grew up, which is rather interesting, or in the same area. And the comment that I heard, which I thought was terrific, was that somebody had said to her, every day in every way, you, meaning you are getting better and better. And it's a great mantra that I'm going to stick on my desktop.
Great. And so okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Joanne.
So, we discussed that, it's like an ongoing lifelong process, to stop these tapes that come on automatically sometimes of self-criticism. I think that, getting positive feedback from others certainly helps. And also learning how to deal with other people who may be difficult, who still have a lot positive about them, helps also. So it's all a learning experience.
Yeah, so maybe trying to find something positive about somebody else. It's like, all right, this person's really annoying me. This may or may not be what you were saying, but what it reminded me of was, I'll say, okay, I'm sort of having some judgments about this person. And I think I wrote about this in the book, actually, and I was working on honor, and like this car pulled up next to me, and I looked over, and there was a woman who kind of had a cigarette dangling out of her mouth. And my immediate judgmental thought was white trash. And then I'm like, oh boy, okay, I'm working on honor. That was really unkind. So I just started looking, and I looked at how like immaculately clean her car was. It was like bright and shiny. The inside was really well done. And, my car had, receipts and coffee cups and all kinds of crap just kind of floating around in it, and hadn't been washed in like 2 months. And so it really was transformative for me to just focus on trying to find something positive about someone when that sort of judgmental thought popped into my head. Okay, Karen, I see your hand up.
Okay. When I don't expect of other people what I expect of myself, that removes obstacles. And the clarity is there to honor the relationship and to see them for who they are. And so I need to credit my aunt, who's in her mid-80s, for teaching me as a child and repeating it numerous times through adulthood when I needed to see it. If you expect of others what you expect of yourself, you're going to be disappointed.
Could you give, I think I know what you mean. Could you give maybe just like a simple example of how that might work? If you don't mind.
Okay, I invite someone, and this is just an example. I'm not saying that this is something that has been an issue for me. If I've invited you over for dinner or out to lunch or to see a show numerous times, and you never return the invitation, it doesn't seem to be reciprocal. If I don't expect of you the behavior that I'm doing, then I'm less likely to say, gee, like what kind of person doesn't reciprocate like that? Or why don't you also return the favor? But maybe there's a reason that I'm not aware of. Maybe there's someone sick living in the home. Maybe that person's embarrassed. Maybe, I don't know, there could be any number of reasons. So when I do things, I try to do them because I think they're good things to do. I hope that I try to find out if those are things that would make somebody else happy. And they don't necessarily have to do the same thing that I do, because they're different people. And so when they don't, I've learned to not be disappointed.
Thank you, Karen. That's a great technique from your aunt to share with all of us. Appreciate that. Marjorie, I see your hand.
Okay, hi. I had a lovely discussion with Mary Ann. It's my first time with this group, and I've 8 years studying Mussar, and I thought, oh, this will be a great thing to do on a snowy night in Minnesota. So I raised the point of yesterday I was in a circumstance where I had a notary come over. I just sold my condo. They had to, I asked her if she wanted me to mask, and she said, no, that's okay. I said, well, I'm vaccinated. And she's like, I'm not. Well, and then there happened to be another man in the my mom's condominium. She's 92, who's doing some work. He wasn't vaccinated. And this is I was like so freaked out. And then I thought, you know what? I wore a mask. I sat at the other end of the table with my mom. And there's really, you can't change people. You just can't change them. And I just sort of like, I did kind of go home a little with a headache because I was so stressed out about it. But I've just learned over 8 years of Mussar that we all have a divine, we all have that divine spark. And for whatever reason, as long as I can only control my own actions. But yeah, I judge them, and I can't not, you know, the judgment was still there, but you still have to treat them with respect. You talk about Kavod, you know, I still treated them with Kavod. So Dibarti.
Thank you. Thank you, Marjorie. And I'm so glad you joined us today, and sounds like you had a great conversation. And yeah, it's like sometimes there will be some real issue where there's a real difference, but and the judgment might be in our head, but what I'm hearing Marjorie say is, but it doesn't mean it needs to come out of our mouth, and it doesn't need to impact how we interact with other people. Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for that. Before we go, I want to pull up the spectrum of honor. It's something which sometimes we look at, sometimes we don't. But I think this is really, there are sort of two key things that I want you to focus on. One is a mantra, which is see to the heart and not to the skin. It's not the one that's in the book, but it's one that, it also scans really well to the song, These Are a Few of My Favorite Things. So Janet, for your singing, see to the heart and not to the skin. So it works pretty well. And it's really, I think, encapsulates a lot of what people were saying, is try to, well, maybe people were or weren't saying this, but when we're trying to see that divine spark, it's sort of seeing their heart and not just what's on the surface. And the spectrum is just a reminder that sometimes we can give people too much honor, which can lead to flattery. It can lead to kind of unhealthy relationships or lack of boundaries or other things. So just a reminder that it's not about honoring people to the maximum amount, and as an exercise, maybe to think about in the coming week, is sort of where you sit on this spectrum. You know, do you tend to treat people a little more rudely than you should, or maybe a little bit more flattery, or in what circumstances does each show up? The other thing is, oops, nope, that was what I wanted. Was just to put up some of the actions you could think about. So again, write down the mantra, and I'll copy all of this and put it into the chat. Some things to think about is maybe just looking for the divine spark in every person you meet. Look for something good when you're noticing yourself judging. Greeting others before they greet you, eliminating a shaming behavior, or write a list of people that maybe you'd like to treat with a little more honor or a little less honor. And I was thinking about what Bonnie said earlier about wishing that she had told her parents something. I had a memory of my mother and sort of a realization today. And I was like, wow, I wish I could have talked to her about that. I wish I could have told her that, like, wow, she did something that I never really noticed or appreciated. All right, so let me copy this list. I'll post it in the chat and then we'll do our closing meditation. Okay. Yeah, Harry.
Yeah, I just want to mention something interesting. I don't know if you heard, when Marjorie was finished talking, she said something. Do you know what she said? She said, "Debarti."
Mhm.
And do you know what that means?
No.
I have spoken. And do you know what the response is? Shamati. I heard you. And what's really nice, I do belong to a group, and that's exactly how we talk. When someone talks, they say, when they're finished, they say Debarti, and we all say Shamati, we heard you. It's so respectful and honorable. I just wanted to share that. Not that this group has to do it, but I really like that she offered that. And maybe Marjorie, where did you learn that, and where do you use that?
I've been a student and practicer of Mussar for 8 years, and that was one of the first things that came up in our Mussar, one of the first Mussar Va'adot that I was in at Mount Zion Temple in St. Paul. After you've said your piece, you respond by saying, Dibarti, I've spoken, so that the group knows you're done and the next person can take their turn, and then the group responds, Shamati, we have heard you. And it just sticks. And now I find myself saying that sometimes in non-Mussar circumstances, and people are like, what? And I'm like, it's my own little secret language.
Yeah.
So it's just habit. It's just a sheer habit.
You know, just a comment, in our women's spirituality group I'm in Minneapolis, not far from Marjorie. I go to a temple down in Florida on Shabbat. And we have a women's spirituality group, and we end each person, we say Shamanu at the end.
Oh, we hear you.
Which is very similar.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention that for whatever it's worth. But I thought
Thank you for uplifting that, Harry. Yeah, it is a great, the Debarti Shamati, and Rabbi Shlomo Volbe, who's one of the great Mussar masters of the 20th century, said the greatest honor you can give to someone is just to notice them, and just to see them and to hear them. So let's all close our eyes, taking once again a deep breath through the nose and hold, and a slow, leisurely exhale. And let's open our eyes half a crack and just take a look at the other people who we've shared this time with. Eyes closed enough so they're a little blurry, and you can see a little light halo around everyone. Reminder of their divine spark. It's something which we're starting to really get to see in one another. Close your eyes and just imagine someone who maybe you've been tussling with a little bit, and viewing them with those half open eyes and seeing their divine spark. When you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, thank you, friends. It's been a pleasure sharing this hour with you. I hope to see you again next week. Please bring a friend. And an early Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.